Sorry, boy, but his captain's got to teach his men what happens to those what crossing.
Captain's got to teach stuff.
Good morning from the Batcave. It is Thursday, November 11th, 2024, and 4 more years. You guys are stuck with them, whether you like it or not. I don't care. I didn't vote. I don't think he's the Antichrist, nor do I think he's the savior of America. I am standing on the fence in this one, and I'm just going, you know what? I'm crucified with Christ, and I am not a part of this thing. But since we're talking about Ahab and Jezebel and things like that, I guess I'll just be Elijah over here talking about Elijah. Because America is going into, I think, a great delusion of its own. I don't think it's the great delusion, but I think it's a great delusion for America. And I might be getting into that in a podcast with a group of people soon. If I do, I'll plug you guys in on that. But right now, I want to just focus on the Bible. We're going to look at 1 Kings, and I don't know how far I'm going to go here because we're looking at basically the whole drama of Elijah and Jezebel and Ahab, and then it's going to involve Jehoshaphat, and then I think Athaliah is his wife, and then their son is going to get killed, and then Athaliah is going to try to wipe out the line of David, and then Jehu is finally going to destroy Jezebel, and he's going to take over northern Israel, and then the priests are going to finally have Athaliah killed and take the one descendant of David that remains and put him on the throne. And then that son is going to murder the son of the priest who saved his life later on in life. And so the priests are going to murder him. And then his son's going to murder the conspirators who murdered them. And I think he gets killed too. And it goes back and forth until somebody from the line of Zadok actually marries into the line of David. And then they seem to have peace after that. And then those kings who are involved with the drama with the priests, they're actually not listed in the genealogy in Matthew. So the offense was bad enough that the priests thought, we're not just going to count these kings anymore. So a lot of drama going on, but it's probably going to take me 2 or 3 sessions to cover all this. I'll see how far I can go because there's quite a bit going on just in northern Israel with just Elijah and Ahab and Jezebel before we get to then Elisha and Jehoshaphat and all that. So we're just going to go and see how far we can get. Now, if you remember the last time, I know it's been a couple of weeks, we talked about Omri, who is Ahab's father. And Omri is going to basically be a commander in the army of the king that was before him. Zimri is going to be the guy who overthrows that king. And the king's name is Baasha. So Baasha, I believe, is I think he's the grandson of... I think it's the grandson of the guy who overthrew Jeroboam's line, or it might be the grandson of Jeroboam. It might be the grandson of Jeroboam. And then basically Baasha is going to be called by God, because this is the hand of the prophet Jehu, the son of Hanani, came the word of the Lord against Baasha. I'm sorry, this Jehu, this prophet, is going to prophesy against Baasha, and Baasha is going to be overthrown by Zimri. So Zimri is just essentially a captain of half of the host of the king's chariots of Israel, and he's just going to overthrow the king. He's going to have him murdered and try to claim to be the king. That's going to be over lickety-split because the people are essentially going to say, we're not going to follow Zimri, we're going to follow Omri, who was probably the commander of the other half of the army. It's a similar thing that you have going on in southern Israel, where you had, if you remember, David's, not Abner, but Joab, was basically killing his rival generals because, again, whoever controls the army is really the power, and the king is like the authority, but they're the executive, if you will. And so if anyone's going to take over, you want it to be somebody who controls the army. Well, Omri and this other guy both control the army, and they're going to have a civil war. They're going to fight, and Omri's going to win. And so Omri's going to win, and he's going to reign for 6 years, he says, in Tirzah. So here's where Omri is. This is Gibeathon. If you remember this Gibeathon, this was kind of the northernmost town controlled by the Philistines still, and basically northern Israel is going to take that. a big chunk of Philistia had been taken into Judah's territory, and essentially Philistia had pretty much the seacoast here. And I think Gath and all this was taken into Judah and during the time of David, and so they're going to have these seacoast towns, and then Gibeathon is going to be kind of their lone northern town that's farther away. It's a walled city, and that's what they're fighting over when this whole debacle happens with the overthrow and then the other overthrow. So Omri is not anointed by God; he is actually picked by the people, which is interesting because you're going to have a few dynasties in northern Israel that are, a prophet actually says, you're going to be next, you're going to be in charge. And one of them is going to be Jeroboam, and the other one's going to be Jehu. And then other people are going to be prophesied to be overthrown, but God is not necessarily anointing the king to take their place. Omri is going to be different because basically Omri is kind of democratically elected. Which is interesting because there just seems to be parallels I've seen since I was a young Christian between this kingdom of Ahab and America. Just, there's a lot that I could get into in prophetic stuff that's kind of too deep to, really stand on hard. So I'm not going to do that. But essentially you've got Omri now reigning from this city called Tirzah. And Tirzah is, if you look at it, it's kind of north. Here's Shechem over here, and Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim, if you remember, where they do the blessings and the cursings when they come in. Jericho is going to be down here. But essentially this is northern Israel, and it's going to be kind of looking down in the valley, and it has this road here that kind of crosses the Jordan River into the other territories of Reuben and Manasseh and Gad on the other side of the river. And then it's kind of centralized between them and the other territories of northern Israel. You've got up here in the Jezreel Valley, you've got Naphtali, you've got Zebulun over here, and then if you go up further north, you're going to have Asher and then Dan, okay, and then the city of Dan up here. So that's kind of centralized in the northern territory. It's not a bad place, but Omri is going to his son Ahab is going to move to Samaria. And from there to the end of the reign of Israel, Samaria is going to be the capital, and that's where the Samaritans come from. This is what the mixed people who are going to be there after they're finally overthrown and deported by the Assyrians. So that's kind of where we start here. If you look at, we're on chapter 16, verse 29. He says, and in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, began Ahab, the son of Omri, to reign. So if you remember who Asa is, he's going to be, I think he's like the third from David. So you've got Solomon, Rehoboam, and then Asa, I believe. So you already see these guys have had essentially multiple generations plus 2 overthrows. Okay, while Israel's just on their third king. And that's because these kings are going to reign longer. Their reigns are going to be more stable. Even the bad kings are going to tend to reign longer because you don't have the civil war in Judah that you have in Israel. You have a steady Davidic line, with the exception of that conflict with Athaliah and then essentially her grandchildren, basically her grandchild and her great-grandchild, between them and the priests. So it says, and Ahab the son of Omri did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him, and it came to pass, as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sin of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, that he took the wife of Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. Now there's a psalm that I don't think I agree with this, but it talks about like a bride being all decked out and stuff like that. And there are some scholars that believe that is a psalm that was originally about Ahab and Jezebel. I don't think so, because the psalms come from the house of David. I don't think anybody in the house of David or in the priesthood is writing a psalm about Ahab and Jezebel in a good way. It just seems stupid. But anyways, he is going to go overboard, and he is going to marry in the Zidonians. Well, Solomon has wives from among the Sidonians. Solomon has wives from all these surrounding nations they're not supposed to marry from. So why is it so bad? Well, the answer is because Jezebel is from a family that is actually the priesthood of the Sidonians. And so what you have is the king of Tyre, if you remember King Hiram, who helps build the temple with Solomon, King Hiram is friendly to the Israelites. And I have a theory that King Hiram is actually that line is actually descended from Troy, and that's where Tyre gets its name, from the same Tyrus, which is where the Thracians, or Troy would get their name. And they're not Sidonian. I want to say it's like the grandfather of Jezebel actually overthrows that kingdom. They murder Hiram. I don't know if they murder Hiram or his son. It's one of the two, but it's not long after that the priesthood is essentially going to murder the kings of Tyre and kind of take over Tyre and Sidon. And so this Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, I actually found this in, I think it was either Theophilus of Antioch or Tatian the Assyrian, and they're getting it from Phoenician historical records, that basically Jezebel's aunt is going to be the one who leaves Phoenicia and founds Carthage. Now, what you probably have is some kind of marriage between the priesthood and the kings of Tyre, and that's how it turns into the overthrow. And so Jezebel's aunt is from, I think, that line that's still from Tyre, and they're going to leave and they're going to found Carthage. Meanwhile, Jezebel's father takes over Tyre, and then Jezebel is given to Israel to wed, because if you remember, Tyre was always friendly with Judah and Israel, because it's kind of like if you have them, they're a maritime trade civilization. So if you have the land all around you safe, which, they're surrounded by Asher and Dan and Naphtali, well, then it makes sense that you want to be on peaceable terms with them, and then you don't have to worry about your land base, and then you can just keep trading by sea and get richer and richer and richer, which is what Tyre does. So they're gonna send their daughter, who is apparently wicked hot and wicked. And she's going to basically marry Ahab, who is the young king of the new dynasty. Remember, his dad is just reigning for 6 years, so he's probably a strapping young lad when he takes the throne. And basically, Ahab is it says he made a grove, which basically means he is setting up a worship space. When you think groves, you want to think, what is that Shakespeare play? Something like Midsummer's Eve or something like that. You want to think there's these Dionysian, or these almost like people running around naked in the woods around some kind of phallic symbol or idol. We don't really know what an Asherah pole looks like. I don't think they are phalluses, though. It sounds like what they are is they're carvings of a deity into what was once a tree. So think about if you had like a big oak tree sitting there, and then you just cut off all its branches and you just cut it down to an idol. That's what an Asherah pole is. And then they would dance around it and maybe have orgies and get drunk and weird stuff like that. That's what they're going to do in these groves. And this is all basically a mixture, this mixed religion that is essentially taking basically the storm god, which is essentially Yahweh appearing to Job in the storm, and then mixing it with the bull god, which is where which is based on the Nephilim and the bull of heaven impregnating Ashtra. And that's how they get Baal. They basically merge those two together. They merge the bull god in with Yahweh and essentially make Baal, which is just kind of a generic term that means the Lord or the Master. And this is almost going to be a direct translation to Zeus. Baal becomes Zeus, because Zeus from Phoenicia starts being looked at as this guy who can transform into a bull and goes down and impregnates women, and he can also wield thunder and stuff like that. And so the whole story of Europa, which is where Europe gets his name from, is Zeus doing that to kidnap a woman, brings her over to Crete, and then they have a child, and that child is the Minotaur bull, which is essentially a Nephilim. Okay, and so you have the Greek Titans or the Gyges or whatever. These are just Nephilim. Probably the Cyclopses are just Nephilim. The Minotaur bull is just Nephilim, and these are just Greek versions of the Nephilim stories, which they would have picked up from this region, because this is the region where the Nephilim came after the flood. And so essentially, you want to basically think of it as like they're worshiping Zeus or Thor. And if you know that Baal is Zeus, And you know that where Satan's throne is, there used to be an altar to Zeus there in Grecia. This god is the main opponent to Yahweh. He is a corruption of Yahweh, just like when they get in the flood and they have this god named Gershu. It's basically like this serpent god, and they call him Lord of the Good Tree, and he's basically a war god. But he essentially competes with Yahweh, who is not a war god. He's just the true God. And this war god is essentially what turns the whole of the pre-flood world to turn into violence, which is why God needs to send the flood. Well, the same thing's going to happen afterwards with this Baal. He basically becomes a god of lust, essentially. Lust, and then he has the power of storms, okay? And so Mars, or Ares, which is actually kind of the evolution of this Ningirsu, or this war god, which is behind Nimrod and the kings of Lagash and Lamech and all these guys, they just make him Baal's son in the mythology, or Zeus's son, Ares or Mars. So this is what they do, is they just keep rejoining these different sons together and making pantheons out of them, as different peoples conquer different peoples or try to make themselves dominant in their own religion. So this Baal, who they're promoting now, is basically Satan. It's Satan himself. It's a mixture of Yahweh and the one who creates the Nephilim. So you have him creating false Christs and wielding thunder. These are powers that belong to Yahweh. This is why he's going to strike down. It says he shoots lightning like arrows, and he's going to strike down the Antichrist with a burst of fire from heaven. So they're basically Satan worshipers now. They go from worshiping these Apis bulls, which are a corrupted trinity, and it's like, that's wrong, and God doesn't like it. It's still a corruption of the same. Again, the bull god, the sun god, is essentially it's essentially based on Nimrod, and then the serpent is wisdom. So it's a counterfeit trinity. So they go from worshiping a counterfeit trinity to now an antichrist or a Satan figure. Okay, so now they have two counterfeit trinities in Dan and Bethel, and now they're also setting up in Samaria this Baal god, this grove to Baal. Okay, so Samaria, we want to talk about Samaria itself. Samaria is actually, the word Samaria is first mentioned in 1 Kings 6 or 13 in a prophecy, and this is kind of curious because he doesn't actually have Samaria yet. Okay, it's going to talk about how he gets Samaria, but in 1 Kings 13 he doesn't have Samaria. And in Samaria, what you have is, if you remember the two prophets, where one prophesies that they're going to go down, and then the other one is basically tests him by lying to him, and then turns out his prophecy was true because that prophet dies. Well, they're going to say, for the saying which he cried by the word of the Lord against the altar of Bethel, and against all the houses of the high places which are in the cities of Samaria, will surely come to pass. Well, Samaria, I don't know if it was called Samaria, because you don't have a city named Samaria at this time, but this says Shamrown. And you do have a hill of Shemer. You have a guy named Shemer who has this hill named Shamrown. So what was likely the case, there is the off chance that this prophet was prophesying about this before it happened, and he knew it was going to be called Samaria one day, and so he says this. But I don't think that's likely. I think it's more likely that they updated it later on some previous name that it was called, so they understood that they're prophesying against basically the two bulls and this thing in Samaria, because they had high places there beforehand, but this Baal thing is not there yet. And so what you have in, it says, in the 36th year of Asa, king of Judah, began to reign over Israel, 12 years, 6 months. He bought the hill of Samaria from Shemer. Okay, so in the previous generation, maybe the hill was called Samaria. See, it says the hill Samaria from Shemer because it's named after this guy named Shemer. And maybe it was called that already in the previous generation, and that's why they're saying Samaria. Or they could have just updated the name. Not entirely certain on that. It does look like it's close enough where it could have already had that name. So anyways, he's going to buy the hill of Shemer, and they're going to build their capital city, Samaria, here. And it's actually a pretty solid location for a city. If you see it, it's up here on this hill. And it's basically looking down in the whole farm valley of Israel, because it's up here, and then they're going to have these other mountains up here. And think of this as like where like Zebulun is on your way to Asher, and this is going to be that whole Jezreel Valley. So here's the Jezreel Valley, and I think the Shamir, they're kind of guessing where it is, but it's like right around here. But they believe it's looking down on the valley, and then there's going to be these other mountains in the background. And so it's kind of aiming towards that Philistine city that they still want to get. It's kind of uphill from there, but it's looking down on, the lands that they control peaceably, which are their farm valleys. And so they can deploy from there. That's the capital, and they probably got like chariot cities and stuff like that where they can deploy a bunch of soldiers from if things get rough. So that's kind of, this is going to be the main scene for northern Israel from this point forward, because that's where it's all going on with their kings. So Ahab is they're going to build this grove for Baal, and it says he reared up an altar of Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. So this capital city they have from day one is it's going to be kind of dedicated to Baal, or they could think of him as like a Zeus. Okay. And Ahab made a grove, and Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God to anger than all the kings of Israel that were before him. In his days did Hiel the Bethelite build Jericho. He laid the foundation there with Abiram his firstborn, set up the gates of his youngest son Segub, according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke by the son of Joshua the son of Nun. So essentially it cost him the lives of his two sons to rebuild Jericho, which is based on a curse that Joshua gave. He said whoever builds the city, they're going to build the wall with the life of their firstborn son and the gate with the life of their secondborn son. And this idiot goes and rebuilds Jericho. Well, Jericho's going to stay rebuilt, and you're going to see it still in the time of Christ, but it's going to cost this guy his life and his son. So then, we're now, 1 Kings 17, we're introducing Elijah the Tishbite. And what you probably have is this other prophet, which was Jehu, who's probably prophesying, and this is his records up until that time, and now it starts being Elijah's record, okay? So it says, Elijah the Tishbite, who was an inhabitant of Gilead, said unto Ahab, as the Lord God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew or rain these 3 years according to my word. Now this is interesting. He says 3 years. But in the New Testament, they say 3.5 years, and it probably extended to 3.5 years, but that's because there's a parallel between Elijah and the two witnesses. So he says 3 years, and the word of the Lord came to him, saying, go hence thee, and turn thee eastward, and hide thyself in the brook Cherith, which is before Jordan. So if you remember, he's from Gilgal. Whoops. He's from Gilgal, which is on the other side of the lake, or the other side of the Jordan River. So Gilgal is going to be up in here, and he's going over here to Shemer, probably to prophesy this prophecy to them, and then they tell him to go hide, get down by the creek. So if you see what I showed you there, this is today. You see all there's kind of woods around there. You probably had a lot more woods and forests back then because they didn't clear it as much because the population wasn't so huge. And he's basically going to be hiding out, essentially camping out down by a creek that leads to the Jordan River. Probably because he knows they're going to go look for him back in Gilgal, or back in Gibeon where he's from. Not Gibeon, Gilead where he's from. And so he just kind of gets down here, and he's down by the creek, and he's got water, okay? So it says, and it shall be after that you will drink of the brook, and I have commanded the ravens to feed thee there. Now this is interesting. Ravens are unclean birds, and obviously whatever they're bringing them, ravens are going to be the kind of birds that are going to typically pick at carcasses. So whatever they're doing, yes, they could be just bringing him bread and stuff, but more than likely they're bringing him meat, and it's unclean meat. So God is having him eat unclean meat that's been handled by an unclean bird. Boy, that would get the Pharisees riled up. And it says he went and did according to the word of the Lord, and he went and dwelt by the brook Cherith, which is before Jordan. So here's this guy on foot, and he goes right into the heartland of the capital of the city that's worshiping Baal, and he says, you're going to get it, thus saith the Lord. He makes it just not rain on them for 3 years, simply because they built this altar to Baal. Not happy about that. said, and the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning. So they were bringing him bread. They were probably just stealing bread and bringing it to him, the Lord's doing, but also meat. So the meat could be coming from the carcasses, or they could just be swiping it from people's tables and stuff. Now, there's this coffee shop I go to, and the birds will eat your sandwich if you leave it there. And they could just be swiping food from people and giving it to him. Seems like that's what they're going to do. And the bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. So he's drinking water. He's eating sandwiches brought by birds. And it said it came to pass after a while that the brook dried up because there had been no rain in the land. So essentially, he stays there drinking of this brook until no more brook because there's so little rain. This brook is going to be, rain is going to trickle down from the mountains. See, it just says the Kishon River, Mount Gilboa. And it's just going to be this trickling brook that goes down that way towards the sea and honestly right up from around Samaria, and it's just going to flow towards here, but it eventually dries up. There's no rain, so there's no brook. It says, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, Arise, get thee to Zarephath, which belongs to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. So he arose and went to Zarephath, which is a city in Sidon. Jesus mentions it in Luke 4, and they want to stone him because he's making a point. Now, here's Tyre. He's all the way up here. See, here's Dan way up here. That's the northernmost point of Israel. So he completely leaves the land of Israel, and he goes all the way up here to stay with a widow. Now, this famine he's causing is extended all the way up to here. It covers the whole land because he has caused it not to rain for 3 years. This is going to be paralleled by Jesus when he, you see Zarephath. Remember the woman from Sarepta who gets the demon? That's the same city. Okay, so Jesus compares how Elijah, there are many people that were poor, and yet he went to Zarephath, to the city that was a widow. Well, this woman, this Canaanite woman who's a Sidonian, they mentioned Sarepta. I want to make sure I'm not making a mistake there. Zarephath he mentions. Oh, it does say Sarepta in Luke. Okay, so they do name it Sarepta. So maybe that woman wasn't from the same city, but she's from the same region. She's a Sidonian, Canaanite woman of a Sidonian kind. And so he cast the demon out of that woman. Well, he's kind of paralleling what Elijah did when the Jews didn't accept him. Okay, remember, Jesus is hanging out up here in around the Sea of Galilee for his whole ministry. They call it Lake Hula, becomes the Sea of Galilee. Or actually, yeah, I think this might be the Sea of Galilee down here. Yeah, I'm sorry, the Sea of Galilee is down here. Anyways, Jesus' ministry is kind of paralleling that, where he's going back and forth. It's kind of paralleling Elijah. So he's up in Zarephath, or Zarepta, which belongs to Zidon, and he says, Behold, I have commanded a widow woman there to sustain thee. And he rose and went to Zarephath, and when he came to the gate of the city, behold, a widow woman was there gathering sticks, and he called her and said, Fetch me, I pray, a little water in a vessel that I may drink. And as she was going to fetch it, he called her and said, Bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in your hand. And she said, As the Lord my God liveth, I have not cake, but a handful of meal, and a barrel, and a little oil, and a cruse. And behold, I am gathering 2 sticks, that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. In other words, this is the last of the food we get, so I'm going to prepare a little fire so I can prepare a little bread, the last bread that I have, with a little oil, and we're going to eat it, and that's it. We're toast. And Elijah said to her, Fear not, and do as thou hast said, but make me thereof a little cake first, and bring it to me, and after make me for thee and thy son. For thus says the Lord God of Israel, the barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil fail until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth. Now, just so happens that after Jesus is going to go cast these demons out of these widow, that's when he does his second feeding with loaves and fishes. Okay? And that is to primarily a Gentile audience that he's doing that to. And it's going to be 7 baskets full. It's going to be 7 fishes and 7 baskets full at the end. And 7 is going to be kind of a truncation of the 70 nations or the sevenfold Holy Spirit in that miracle. So he's paralleling this, okay? Then it says she went and did according to the sign of Elijah. She and he and her whole house did eat many days. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail. Just like they had just, the 7 loaves, and it kept being enough, according to the word of the Lord which he spake by Elijah. And it came to pass after these things that the woman of that the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, fell sick, and his sickness was sore, so that there was no breath left in him. In other words, he stopped breathing. And he said to Elijah, what have I to do with thee, O man of God, that thou come and call my sin to remembrance and slay my son? In other words, she's acknowledging her sin, but why does he have to die for her sin? See how it's kind of similar to this woman who's got a daughter who's demon-possessed? And he said to her, give me your son. And he took him out of her bosom and carried him up to a loft where he abode and laid him in his own bed. So this is probably a little tiny kid, okay? Then he carries unto the Lord and says, O Lord my God, hast thou brought evil upon the widow with whom I sojourned by slaying her son? So he stretched himself upon the child 3 times, and he cried to the Lord and said, O my Lord, I pray thee, let this child's soul come into him again. So he's doing almost exactly what Paul does. Remember when the kid falls out of the window and he almost dies? Paul does almost the exact same thing over that kid as Elijah does over this kid. And the Lord heard the voice of Elijah, and the soul of the child came into him again, and he revived. So he was legit dead, but his soul came back into him, and he lived. And Elijah took the child and brought him down out of the chamber into the house, and delivered him to his mother. And Elijah said, see, thy son liveth. And the woman said to Elijah, now I know that you art a man of God, and the word of the Lord is in that it is truth. So she's already getting supernatural food, but now she knows he's a man of God. And it came to pass after many days that the word of the Lord came to Elijah in the 3rd year, saying, go show yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain upon the earth. And Elijah went to show himself to Ahab, and there was a sore famine in Samaria. Remember, he's just been hiding from Ahab for 3 years. He made it not rain for 3 years, and he just went over here and just hid. First he hid by the brook, and then when the brook ran out, he went over here and hid. So for 3 years, he is just not... Ahab has not seen him. He just prophesied there's going to be no rain, and that's that. And this Ahab's like, well, I'm not just going to kill this guy for saying there's going to be no rain. But then there's no rain for 3 years. So Ahab's like, oh, I should have grabbed that dude. And Ahab called Obadiah, which was the governor over his house. Now Obadiah feared the Lord greatly. So see, Ahab still got God-fearing people among him. Isn't that awesome? And it was so when Jezebel cut off the prophets of the Lord that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water. So think about this. There are so many prophets in Israel, he's hiding them by 50s. Okay? So when people are like, anyone who claims that there's still prophets is like they're adding to the canon. Be like, well, who are these prophets that are so many that he's got to hide them by 50s, and yet not one of them utters a word that's in Scripture? They're obviously prophesying because they're prophets. So who are they? Well, Jezebel comes in, and remember, northern Israel didn't have a priesthood. They kind of have a janky, made-up priesthood, probably in Dan and Bethel for these golden calves, which are probably offering up incense and some kind of fake rendition of what the Levites do. And Jezebel comes in with her Baal cult, and she knows there's these other prophets around them, and they just have a tradition of prophets ever since Samuel. They had camps of prophets. They'd have prophet camp meetings where they'd all get together and blather on in tongues and prophecy and stuff like that, okay? Well, Jezebel's like, yeah, let's kill those dudes. She killed them all. She comes right in and kills them all. Remember, he's just been ruling now for a few years, and he marries Jezebel, and she comes right in and just starts killing all the prophets. Why? She hates them. Her god is Satan. Okay, she's super evil. And so it says that Obadiah took 100 prophets and hid them by 50 in caves. So there's 100 that he's spared. But Elijah has skedaddled because apparently there were way more that she killed. There's hundreds of prophets in northern Israel. And Ahab says to Obadiah, go into the land unto all the fountains of water and unto all the brooks, and peradventure we may find grass to save the horses and mules alive, that we not lose all the beasts. Now it makes me wonder if this Obadiah has any relation to the Obadiah who writes Obadiah. We don't know. It would have been probably like, not quite 100 years later. Yeah, actually, it probably would be about 100 years later. So it could be like a grandson or somebody who's named after him, or it could just be just a common name. So it says they divided the land between them to pass through it, and Ahab went one way by himself, and Obadiah went another way by himself. So what are they doing? He's saying, go into the land, into all the fountains of water, and unto the brooks. Peradventure we may find grass to save the horses and mules alive, so that we do not lose all the beasts. So they're literally just going out trying to find any grass for the animals to eat, so they don't all die. Because if they die, well, then they lose all their chariots and their horses and their toast. And as Obadiah was by the way, behold, Elijah met him, and he knew him. And he fell on his face, and he said, are you my Lord Elijah? So he recognized him. I know this guy. He's a legit prophet. How do they know? How does he know? He knows the prophets. That's how he knows. He's hiding them. He knows who Elijah is. And he answered him. He says, go tell thy Lord, behold, Elijah is here. And he said, what have I sinned that you would deliver thy servant into the hand of Ahab to slay thee? In other words, I'm not going to go back to him and tell him I found Elijah, because he's going to be like, then why didn't you kill that mofo? I'm going to kill you now. So, as the Lord lives, there is no nation or kingdom, whether my Lord has not sent to seek thee. And when they said he is not here, he took an oath of the kingdom of the nation that they found thee not. So, in other words, Ahab had a pretty powerful army with horses and chariots, and he went all around. He went probably to Ammon and Hamath and to Sidon and to, Moab. And, have you seen Elisha? No. Swear to me that you haven't seen Elisha. Or I'm going to come get you. And he says, and now thou sayest, go tell the Lord Elijah is here. And it shall come to pass, as soon as I am gone from me, that the Spirit of the Lord shall carry thee whither I know not. And so when I come to tell Ahab, and he cannot find thee, he will slay me. But I, the servant of the Lord, I thy servant, have feared the Lord from thy youth. Once again, King James Version doesn't know how to translate into English because it's 500 years old. So, has it not been told the Lord what the Lord did to Jezebel when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord, how I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets, 50 to a cave, and provided them with bread and water? In other words, there's been a famine, y'all, and I managed to keep 100 people alive, feeding them and everything. He's obviously a good guy. He's a commander over half the king's host, probably, and he's a good guy. He fears God. Yet now you say, go tell the Lord that Elijah is here. He will surely kill me. And Elijah said, as the Lord of hosts lives, before whom I stand, I will surely show myself to him today. Okay, he's like, I'm not going to run away. So Obadiah went and met Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, is it you troubler of Israel? And he's like, no, it's that biatch that you married. That's the troubler of Israel. Okay, bros before those. He answered, I have not troubled Israel, but you have in your father's house, because you have forsaken the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals. How dare thee? And now, therefore, have all of Israel assembled before me at Mount Carmel, and the 450 prophets of Baal, and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. So remember, Asherah is the consort of Baal. Okay? By this time, remember, Asherah was the woman who first starts making Nephilim. The bull of heaven is the one who impregnates her. And they've merged the story of Yahweh, and they've merged the story of the bull of heaven and the story of Asherah all into one. And so they've got this Baal and Asherah, which are kind of a counterfeit Christ in the church. And it's their version, if you will, of the Antichrist and the whore of Babylon. And they've got 450 prophets or priests or whatever, prophets of each of them. So even 900 of these people. Man, we are on welfare here, and these people you're feeding 900 people who just run around, dancing around naked and acting weird, who eat at Jezebel's table. So Ahab sent to all the Israelites and assembled the prophets of Mount Carmel. Now Jezebel's related to Tyre, and they ship in food, so they probably got plenty of food. Elijah then came near to all the people and said, how long will you go limping with two different opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him, but if Baal, follow him. In other words, pick a God. You can't be like, oh, we serve the Lord through these weird calf bull things, and we also serve Baal. No. God does not share space. The people did not answer to him a word. So probably when you see Baal and then you see the Baals, okay, you probably are looking at Baal and the two calves are probably the Baals, okay? Or it might just be a generic term for the gods, in other words, the pagan gods, okay? So it could be Baal and Asherah, but right now they worship Baal, they worship Asherah, they worship these two golden calves. None of this God is happy about. The people did not answer him a word. In other words, he said, make a stand. Are you for God or against God? And people were like, let's see what happens. Not a good call. Then Elijah said to the people, even I only, am left a prophet of the Lord, but Baal's prophets number 450. Let's do this. Let 2 bowls be given to us. Let them choose 1 bowl for themselves, cut it in pieces and lay it upon the wood, but put no fire on it. And I will prepare the other bowl and lay it on the wood, but put no fire on it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of Yahweh, the God who answers by fire, is indeed God. Remember, God has the power to call down fire from heaven. That's how he destroys the Antichrist. He shoots lightning like arrows. Remember, he's in the days of Samson. With Samson's mom, he came down with fire, and he took up the offering and the sacrifice. I think he did that with Gideon, too. So this is the thing he does. You put out a good snack for him, and he's like, all that needs is cooking. I got this. And he comes down and he cooks it and he eats it because he likes the snacks. And so all the people answered, well spoken. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal. In other words, that's a good idea. That's a good way to find out which one of these is God, because these guys pretty much killed all the prophets, and there's a lot of prophets saying Baal's the true God. But let's do this contest thing. I like this idea. Then Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose for yourselves 1 bowl and prepare it first, for you are many. Then call on the name of your God, but put no fire on it. You don't get to cheat. So they took the bowl that was given to them, prepared it, and called on the name of Baal from morning until noon, crying, "O Baal, answer us." Remember, Baal is supposed to be the god of lightning. And they don't have rain. They don't have storms. They don't have clouds. They don't have lightning. Their God is the God of storms. This is why he says, no rain. Why? I just bound your so-called God of storms. They would regularly have, look where they are. This is northern Israel. They would regularly have these Mediterranean, humidity and clouds coming in from the sea and then pouring rain on them. It was great. And then flow down the mountains. They'd have all these rich farmlands and stuff like this. And Baal was their god of storms. Ever since Job, Yahweh showed up to Job in the clouds, or in the whirlwind. And he's like, okay, how do you like me now? Okay, imagine your god is Thor, god of thunder, or your Zeus, the god of lightning, and he's just like, no rain, no storms. This one dude. So he's like, why don't you go call your storm god and see if you can get him to go shoot some lightning down at this meat and eat it. But there was no voice and no answer. And this is how these people would think. When it thundered, they would say, that's the voice of Baal. That's why when the Lord speaks down from heaven in the Gospel of John and says, this is my son, it says the people heard him, thought it thundered. God speaking from heaven apparently sounds like thunder. And that's something that carries from ancient times all the way up into the time of Christ. At noon, Elijah mocked them, saying, cry aloud, surely he's a god. Either he's meditating, or he's wandered away, or he's on a journey, or perhaps he's asleep and must be awakened. I thought he said maybe he's gone to use the bathroom. He says something like that. Maybe he's asleep. We'll see. He's going to keep mocking them. I would love to have this job. I'm not going to lie. If somebody was like, here's going to be your job, and then they're going to kill you, I'd be like, I'll take that job. This is awesome. Maybe he's going to the bathroom. Then they cried aloud and said, as was their custom, they cut themselves with swords and lances until blood gushed over them. This is still going on in this territory. That's what Hezbollah does. They cut themselves with swords and lances until blood gushed over them. This is what Hezbollah does. Okay? As midday passed, they raved until the time of the offering of the oblation. There was no answer, no voices, no response. Remember, these people have glow stick raves at night around these Asherah poles, right? They get the beads and the raver candy or whatever, and they just dance around, and then they do gay stuff. Well, it's not working. Well, now they're cutting themselves and doing gay stuff and dancing around and flailing about and being Nancy's. And it's still not working. And you're like, we're dancing around as gay as we can, and yet still no thunder. Come on, you guys. We're gaying as hard as we can. Then Elijah said to all the people, come closer to me. And the people came closer to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord that had been thrown down. And Elijah took 12 stones, according to the number of 12 tribes of Israel, to whom the word of the Lord, saying, Israel shall be your name. In other words, this is how they're supposed to make altars, just uncut stones, because that's all they are, is just rough stones. With the stones he built an altar in the name of Yahweh, Yahovah. Then he made a trench around the altar, enough to contain 2 measures of seed. Next, he put the wood in order, and he cut the bowl in pieces and laid it on the wood. And then he said, fill 4 jars with water and pour it on the burnt offering of the wood. In other words, make the wood nice and wet. Make it all wet, because it's so easy to light wet wood on fire, right? Then he said, do it again. And they did it again. Again, he said, do it a 3rd time. And they did it a 3rd time. So at that, the water ran around the altar and filled the trench around the altar. So it's so much water, it's filled a trench around the altar with water. Everything's just sopping wet. At that time, the offering of the oblation, the prophet Elijah came near and said, O Lord God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known this day that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and that I have done all these things at your bidding. In other words, what is he saying? Is he saying I'm working up the faith to make this happen? No, he's saying this is what the Lord told me to do, so I'm doing it. Now he's got to do his part. Answer me, O Lord, answer me, so that these people that know that you are the Lord. Now let's see what he says. He said, answer me, Yahovah. And he says that you are the Elohim, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in Israel, in the day that you are Elohim in Israel, and I am your servant. So that's really frustrating that they just put Lord back and forth, because they're using different words here. You want to... I might have to do an Old Testament at some point in time that just puts Yahweh and Elohim in there, because it just, when they just say Lord, and sometimes it's Elohim and sometimes it's Yahweh, and then they're different names, okay? So, he said, O Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So it doesn't say Lord God of Abraham. It's the Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Let it be known that you are Elohim. So Yahweh, the Elohim of Abraham, Isaac, that you are the Elohim in Israel, and I am your servant, and I have done all this at your bidding. Answer me, O Yahovah, that you are Yahovah Elohim. Yahovah Elohim is the creator. So he says, answer me, O Yahovah, answer me to know that you, Yahovah, are Elohim, and have turned, that you have turned their hearts back. Then the fire of the Lord fell and consumed the burnt offering. The real God of the storm shows up. The wood, the stones, and the dust, and even licked up the water that was around the trench. How you like me now? Because I needed something to wash down my snack. So I just licked up all the water around. When all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, Yahweh is indeed Elohim. Yahweh is indeed Elohim. Elijah said to them, seize the prophets of Baal and do not let them escape. Then they seized them, and then Elijah brought them down to the Wadi Kishon, and he killed them there, all 450. I'm going to do some stabby stab for a minute here. It's going to take a while. You just hold them steady, and I'll kill them all. Now remember, you might think, oh, they would fear the king. No. These people have watched the land dry up for 3 years. They have no food. When you get a bunch of starving people, they don't fear the king. No. We don't fear the king. We fear our bellies. So Elijah said to Ahab, go up, eat and drink, for there's a sound of rushing rain. See, this is all just a rebuke. God doesn't hate Ahab. Now, eventually, God's going to have it with Ahab. Ahab's just stupid, and he married the wrong woman, and she's got him doing the wrong God stuff. And so That's what you get for dating that girl who's kind of a hippie, but she's into all this weird Bethel stuff, but she is cute and she's kind of dumb. And you like her, and next thing you know, you're at Bethel going through a fire tunnel and acting crazy pants. Well, you don't want that girl. You want a girl who's sound-minded. Anyway, it says Elijah went up to the top of Carmel, and there he bowed himself down to the earth and put his face between his knees. Then he said to his servant, "Go look up towards the sea." And he went up, and he said, "There's nothing." And then he said, "Go again 7 times." So he didn't say go 7 times. He said go again 7 times. He kept sending him back. Okay. At the 7th time, he said, "Look, a little cloud no bigger than a person's hand is rising up out of the sea." And then he said, "Go say to Ahab, harness your chariot and go down before the rain stops you." He said, "Get on your chariot, get back to your house before you get overtaken, because there's going to be so much rain. And in a little while, the heavens will grew black with clouds and wind, and there was a heavy rain, and Ahab rode off and went towards Jezreel." So where does all this take place? Mount Carmel. If you remember, there's Caesarea. Here's Mount Carmel. I think Saul set him up something there, and Jezreel's down here. So he's like, "You need to go." They're up in here watching this rain come over the seas. And he's like, "You got to get, because the rains are going to come." But the hand of the Lord was on Elijah, and he girded up his loins and ran in front of Ahab to the entrance of Jezreel. In other words, he outran his chariots. See, the Lord sometimes, it just says he girded up his loins. That means he picks him up by his belt and just, like, you got your kid and you just pick him up by his belt and you're just like, it looks like he's going so fast and he's just kicking his legs. That's how it was. Think of Elijah running like a cartoon character, because that's pretty much what's going down. God just picks him up by his pants and he just runs him across the land. And he's like... He's running as fast as he can. It feels like you're going incredibly fast. Oh, it's hilarious. That's hilarious. It's like Quicksilver on a bad day. Anyways, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah has done, how he killed the prophets with the sword. "But we got rain, wifey. Isn't that awesome?" She's like, "No, that's not awesome. Those are my peeps." Then Jezebel sent the messenger Elijah, saying, so may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by tomorrow. So she sent a messenger to Elijah saying, "I'm going to kill you dead by tomorrow. So may the gods do to me if I don't by tomorrow." Well, you just cursed yourself. How you like that? If she doesn't kill him in one day, she's cursed herself. Then he was afraid, and he got up and fled for his life and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there. So he went all the way from there to Beersheba. Beersheba is in the south of Judah. It's basically the southernmost town in Judah. So they're not really at open war, because Ahab is actually going to eventually give a daughter to Jehoshaphat. But he goes all the way, he runs from way up here all the way down here. Now we're talking about probably like 75 miles. He's just like, and really the Lord's just carrying him. And he himself went on a day's journey into the wilderness, and then came down under a solitary broom tree and asked that he might die. "It is enough now, Lord. Take away my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors. Just let me die. This sucks. I've just been running for years." Then he lay down under the broom tree, and he fell asleep. Suddenly an angel touched him and said to him, "Get up and eat." And he looked, and there at his head was a cake baked with hot stones and a jar of water. And he's like, "I like snacks. You like snacks. Let's just have snacks and be on." And he ate and drank, and he lay down again. Then the angel of the Lord came a second time, touched him, and said, "Get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you." It's really weird, because he's picking him up by his pants and just running him around places. But he's like, "You need to eat, otherwise you're going to run out of energy." So he got up and he ate and drank in the strength of that food for 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. So he's traveling for 40 days and 40 nights nonstop. And he's going all the way back to Mount Sinai. So he went all the way up from here, all the way down to Beersheba. Now he's going all the way down to Mount Sinai down here. It's apparently a 40-day journey. So apparently the Lord is not picking him up by his pants. Now he's just walking. At that place, he came to a cave and spent the night there. And then the word of the Lord came to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So again, he's doing something that the Lord mirrors. Remember, the Lord goes in the wilderness, 40 days and 40 nights fasting, right? Well, the word of the Lord comes to him, and he's in a cave on Mount Horeb. And the Lord's saying, "What are you doing here? Hey, you came to one of my old hangouts. What are you doing here?" And he answered, he said, "I have been very zealous." So this is the Debar Elohim. This is what the word of the Lord is, okay? Debar Elohim. It could be Debar Yahweh. Let's see. Yahovah. Debar Yahovah, okay? So it's the word of the Lord comes to him, and the word of the Lord is a person, remember? So this is a pre-incarnate Christ, comes to him and says, "What up, dude?" Now, it looks like it was an angel before. We don't really have a specific, the Lord is doing this. He doesn't really have a direct encounter with the Lord. He's getting the word of the Lord by like prophecy, but now he's having a direct encounter with the Lord. And he says, "What are you doing here, Elijah? What's good?" And he said, "I have been jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, Yahweh, Elohim of the hosts. For the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant and thrown down thine altars and slain thy prophets with the sword. And even I, am the only one left. They seek my life to take it away." This is important because Jesus is going to say about John the Baptist, they did to him everything that they wanted to do to Elijah. He said, "They seek my life to take it away. They want to kill me." Well, they didn't kill him, but they killed John the Baptist, who was the second Elijah. And he said, "Go forth and stand upon the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and great and strong wind rent the mountains and brake in pieces the rocks before the Lord." Remember how the Lord's in a storm in the first place? And he said, "The Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind rent the mountains." But he said, "But the Lord was not in the wind." Well, that's how he appeared to Job, but he just passed by, and his passing by caused this great wind, but the Lord is not in the wind. Why? What is the point he's making? After the wind was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. See, he's trying, I'm bigger than these things. Then after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. I'm bigger than that. I'm not the God of earthquakes. I'm not the God of storms. I'm not the God of fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. This is who I am. The God that speaks to you in a still small voice, telling your conscience what to do. And it was so that Elijah heard it, and he wrapped his face in his mantle, and he went out and stood in the entering of the cave, and behold, there came a voice to him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And he said, "I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, because the children of Israel have forsaken thy covenant, and thrown down the altars, and slain thy prophets with a sword, and I, am the only one left, and they seek to take my life and take it away." I just told you this before the fire and the craziness just happened. And the Lord said unto him, "Go return on thy way to the wilderness of Damascus," which is where Paul went after he meets the Lord. "And then comest to anoint Hazael to be king over Syria." Now, if you remember these Hazael, he's going to be a descendant of the people in the days of Solomon, who basically came from, I think, Hamath. Remember, David had taken in Hamath and sacked it, and this is going to be a leftover noble from that line. And then he's going to go to Damascus and be king there. "And Jehu, the son of Nimshi, shall you anoint to be king over Israel." So there you go. We're done with this line of Omri thing real quick. You're going to anoint Jehu, you're going to anoint Hazael, and these guys are going to deal with the house of Ahab. "And Elisha, the son of Shaphat, and Eloah shall you anoint to be prophet in thy room," or in your place. It's so weird when the King James says, "in your room," like he's going to go in your bedroom and be the prophet. No, it's in your place. It's so weird that the King James doesn't see these obvious things. "And it shall come to pass that he that escapes the sword of Hazael shall Jehu slay, and he that escapes from the sword of Jehu shall Elisha slay." So in other words, you're done. You've done your work. I realize. Now, it's really weird because he's only been a prophet doing all his thing for about 3.5 years. That's it. And then he gets raptured. It's really interesting. So he does his reign thing, and then it's been 40 days and 40 nights, which is very close to the ministry of Jesus and John the Baptist. It's about 3.5 years if you count the 40 days after that Jesus is walking around after his death and resurrection. So Elisha's basically stayed up here with his widow for 3 years. He doesn't show up. That's it. That's all he does is 3 years. And now he's like, now go anoint your replacement, which is kind of like Christ and the church. Go anoint Peter and the others to take over for you. And he's going to anoint him to have a double anointing. And Jesus is going to say to his apostles, greater things shall you do than what I did. Yet you have left me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees which have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth which has not kissed him. So, you Calvinists, when you get to Romans 9 and you realize that he says, yet I have left to me 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him, right? He is not saying, I have preserved 7,000 people so that they did not bow the knee to Baal. He is not saying that. He is saying, in this context, remember he said, I'm the only one left and they seek to kill me. And Paul's saying, but he wasn't the only one left. He has left 7,000. Okay? So it's a response to what Elijah said. That's what Paul is saying. And he is not saying he's kept them from bowing the knee to Baal. He's saying all the knees which have not bowed to Baal. So in other words, what Elijah said is, I'm the only one left who serves you because they've killed everyone else who serves you. And he's saying, no, I have 7,000 left, all the knees who have not bowed to Baal. In other words, God kept alive the 7,000 that have not bowed to Baal. Remember that other guy kept 100 prophets alive. Well, he's got 7,000 people. That's a remnant because you probably have close to 7 million people, and it's only 7,000. But the point is, all the people who have not bowed to Baal, he's kept alive. So he's not saying I've kept alive 7,000 people and have caused them not to bow the knee to Baal. He's saying I have kept alive the 7,000 people who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So they, of their own free will, did not bow to Baal, and he, because he's God and awesome, kept them alive. And every mouth which has not kissed him. Okay? So don't take that passage in Romans 11 and make that about predestination and God causing them not to do that. Because in the context of what's being said by Paul and by Elijah and God, it's clearly not what he's saying. He's saying that there's some left, God has kept alive, those who have not bowed to Baal. So he departed from thence and found Elisha the son of Shaphat, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him, and he with the 12th, and Elijah passed him and cast his mantle upon him. Tossed his mantle. What's his mantle? Oh, it's sheepskins and goatskins and stuff. You know, the prophet mantle. Why do they wear sheepskins and goatskins? It's probably like a throwback to Abel. That would be my guess. Or it's a type of being clothed with Christ, who is the Lamb. Could be that. And he left the oxen and ran after Elijah. And he says, let me, I pray thee, kiss my father and mother, and then I will follow me. And he said, go back again, for what have I done to thee? And he returned back from him, took a yoke of oxen, slew them, boiled their flesh with instruments of the oxen, gave to the people, and they did eat. And they arose and went after Elijah and ministered him. And let's have a barbecue first. I'm going to go be the next prophet after Elijah. This is great. And he comes a-running. And he's going to be a prophet for a while. He's probably a young man now. I would guess he's in his 20s. And he's going to keep going. And he's even going to prophesy after his death. Then Ben-Hadad, the king of Assyria, gathered all his hosts together. And there were 32 kings with him. So Ben-Hadad is going to be... this is going to be the lineage. Remember, he is going to... This means son of Hadad. Okay? And Elijah's going to anoint the guy who's going to take over for him. So he's the king of Syria. And you want to understand when you see Syria in the Bible, he is not saying Syria, he is saying Aram, okay? So you want to understand the Arameans. Here's Damascus. There's Mount Hermon. This is kind of here's Dan right here. And on the other side of Mount Hermon is Damascus. They were completely under the heel of David and Solomon. But then when Solomon messed up, they kind of declare their independence. And they don't really get it back. And you see Zedad, that's where he was from. Hazar. This whole region, basically up to Euphrates River, is kind of where they hold sway over people. but this is the core of their kingdom. You see how it comes right down here. You see Geshur, there's Dan, and here is Gilead over here. So Gilead is kind of like the secure part of Israel, and this is kind of the Golan Heights. So they are encroaching on territory that had been northern Israel's. They had been mostly from the half tribe of Manasseh, and Gilead is kind of that core that is still theirs. And it's basically the Golan Heights. And Geshur is this other king. If you remember, Absalom was a Geshurite, so it's kind of between them, but they're an Aramean king. So they have kings of all these cities, these Aramean kings, okay? And he's got about 32 of them under his sway, and probably others, because the Arameans go all the way up to Mesopotamia. But this is the core of their kingdom. Let's see. Ben-Hadad, the king of Assyria, gathered his hosts together, and they were 32 kings with him, and horses and chariots, and he went up and besieged Samaria and warred against it. And he sent messengers to Ahab, the king of Israel, into the city, and said to him, "Thus said Ben-Hadad." So he's just surrounding a city, and then he just sends messengers to go in. Diplomats, if you will. He says, "Your gold and your silver is mine. And your fairest wives and your children, they're also mine." And the king of Israel said, "As you say, O my lord, O king, I am yours and all that I have." In other words, he just completely punks out to him. And the messengers came again and said, "Thus says Ben-Hadad, I have sent to you, saying, deliver to me your silver, your gold, and your wives and your children. Nevertheless, I will send my servants to you tomorrow about this time, and they will search your house and the house of your servants, and lay hands on whatever pleases them, and take it away. So we're just going to pillage you, just like the Egyptians did with Israel." Then the king of Israel called all the elders in the land and said, "Look now and see how this man is seeking trouble. For he sent to me for my wives and my children, my silver, my gold, and I did not refuse him." In other words, he's saying when you open up to him and he says, "What's mine is yours," he's submitted to him. He goes all the way down from Damascus to Samaria, and he says, you are my biatch. And he goes, "All right, I am your biatch." Then all the elders and all the people said to him, "Do not listen or consent." And then he sent messengers to Ben-Hadad, saying, "Tell the lord of thy king, all that you first commanded your servant I will do, but this thing I cannot do." The messengers left and brought him word again. In other words, he was going to send to him all his wives and his children and his silver and gold. But now he's basically saying, "Let us into the city and we're going to plunder everyone." And he's like, "I would have let you plunder me, but not my city, not my people." Ben-Hadad sent to him and said, so in other words, it would have been like tribute, if you will. Then Ben-Hadad sent to him and said, "The gods do so to me and more also, if the dust of Samaria will provide a handful for each of the people who follow me." In other words, I'm going to have so big of an army that there won't be a handful of dust for everyone in my army in Samaria. That's how many people are going to be there. And the king of Israel answered and tell him, "The one who puts the army should not brag like one who takes off. One who puts on his armor should not brag like one who takes it off." He said, in other words, don't talk, act, okay? It's like, brag when you're done. Let's see how this goes down. So Ahab's kind of being a boss, but not really. When Ben-Hadad heard this message, now he had been drinking with the kings in the booths, he said to him, "Take your positions." And they took their positions against the city. Then a certain prophet came to King Ahab, the son of Israel. So remember, there's still 100 prophets. "Thus says the Lord, have you seen all this great multitude? Look, I will give it in your hand today, and you will know that I am the Lord." So Ahab is like dancing on the fence between a good guy and a bad guy the whole time. He's just Prince Harry. He's just Prince Harry. That's all there is to it. Ahab said, "By whom?" He said, "Thus says the Lord, by the young men you serve with the district governors." Then he said, "Who shall begin the battle?" And he answered, "You." Then he mustered the young men who served the district governors, 232. After them he mustered all the people of Israel, 7,000. So it seems like a lot, but it's not. Then they went out at noon while Ben-Hadad was drinking himself drunk in the booths, and 32 kings allied with him. And the young men who served him, the district governors, went out first. Ben-Hadad had sent out the scouts, and they reported to him, "Men have come from Samaria." And he said, "If you've come out for peace, take them alive. If they've come out for war, take them alive." But these had already come out of the city. The young men who served in the district governors and the army followed them. Each killed his man, and the Arameans fled, and Israel pursued them. But King Ben-Hadad of Aram escaped on his horse with the cavalry. So they actually did all right. The king of Israel went out, attacked the horses and chariots, and defeated the Arameans with a great slaughter, with 7,000 men. So he has 32 kings. Well, are these kings over 32 cities that each threw up 100 men? Because apparently you're going to be like, my army's going to be so big, my milkshake will bring all the boys to the yard. And it didn't bring all the boys to the yard because 7,000 took them out. Now, I don't get this, how they're like, he rallies 7,000 men when a couple of generations earlier, Israel had like 180,000 men in their army. It's almost like a lot of people are like, yeah, we don't like you as much. They're not. It's like the kingdom is not as strong as united, and so the draft does not have as much pull. A lot of them are just keeping to their own lands and their territories. Then the prophet approached the king of Israel and says, come strengthen yourself and consider what you have to do, for in the spring the king of Aram will come up against you. And the servant of the king said to him, their gods are the gods of the hills, and so they are stronger than we. But let us fight against them in plain, and surely we will be stronger than them. So they think they're being helped because their gods are the gods of the hills. Also do this. Remove the kings, each from his post, and put commanders in place of them, and muster an army like the army that you have lost, horse for horse and chariot for chariot, and then we will fight against them in the plain, and surely we will be stronger than they. And they heeded their voice and did so. Now, Ben-Hadad has got to not be looking that popular today. He's like, go draft another army like the one we just lost, and we'll do better this time because we'll be in the plains. Because their gods, he's blaming their gods for his loss. Maybe he just sucks as a king. And in the spring, Ben-Hadad mustered the Arameans and went up to Aphek to fight against Israel. Now, I'm not sure exactly where Aphek is. Here it is. Aphek is up here in the northeast in Jezreel. So maybe they're coming around these mountains up here. Remember, they own the Golan Heights, so they probably are coming around here with this army, or they just went down through here and they're like, here's where we're going to fight. We're going to fight them in the plain. After the Israelites had been mustered and provisioned, they went out to engage the people of Israel and camped opposite them like two little flocks of goats while the Arameans filled the country. They have their 7,000 people, like two little flocks of goats. And a man of God approached the king and said to the king of Israel, thus saith the Lord, because the Arameans have said, the Lord is the God of hills and not the God of the valleys. Notice it's not because you have repented, Ahab, and put away that Jezebel and all her gods. He's like, because they talk crap about Yahweh, saying he's really strong in the hills but not in the valleys. Therefore I will give this great multitude in your hand, and you will know that I am the Lord. You see how much the Lord is showing up for Ahab and saying, I'm God, I'm God, I'm God, Ahab. Do you want me to kill you? Okay. They encamped opposite another 7 days, and on the seventh day the battle began. The Israelites killed 100,000 Aramean foot soldiers in one day. 7,000. Now they've got 7,000 and they do have chariots. Okay. This is their home turf. These guys have a big foot soldier army, but they have a whole bunch of chariots. That's how they roll. And so when it comes to these valleys, they're just like, well, we're just going to run by them with our chariots and chuck spears at them until they're gone. And each one of our 7,000 guys, well, they're going to chuck 10 spears at your guys running by chariots, and we're going to mow a few of them down. How's that sound? And they kill 120,000. The rest fled to the city of Aphek, and the wall fell on 27,000 men that were left. And Ben-Hadad also fled and entered in the city to hide. The wall fell on them. I don't know how that went down. Maybe God did it. And the servant said to him, look, we have heard the kings of the house of Israel are merciful kings. Let us put sackcloth around our waists and ropes on our heads and go out to the kings of Israel, and perhaps they will spare your life. So they tied sackcloth around their waists, put ropes on their heads, and went to the king of Israel and says, your servant Ben-Hadad says, please let me live. And he said, is he still alive? He is my brother, oh my friend. Forgive me. What was I thinking? Now the men that were watching for an omen, they quickly took it from him and said, yes, Ben-Hadad is your brother. Then he said, go and bring him. And Ben-Hadad came out to him, and he had him come up on a chariot. Ben-Hadad said to him, I will restore the towns that my father took from your father. So if you remember, in the prior generations, they had invaded northern Israel and taken a bunch of cities from them. And he said, and you may establish bazaars for yourself in Damascus as my father did in Samaria. In other words, bazaars, think of these as like tent merchants, okay? In other words, you can set up guys to come sell a bunch of stuff in Damascus, just like we would send a bunch of guys to sell a bunch of stuff in Samaria. And the king of Israel responded, and I will let you go on those terms. And he made a treaty with him and let him go. At the command of the Lord, a certain number of the company of prophets said to one another, strike me. And a man refused to strike him. So these are just random prophets saying this stuff. He said, strike me. Hit me in the face. And I'm not going to hit you in the face. And then he said to him, because you have not obeyed the voice of the Lord, as soon as you have left me, the lion will kill you. And when he had left him, the lion met and killed him. He's like, I thought this guy was crazy. And he was just like, hit me in the face. I'm like, I'm going to hit you in the face, old man. And he's like, because you didn't hit me in the face, that was the word of the Lord, you're toast. You're dead. Okay. So he found another man, and he said, strike me. And he's like, on it. Whoosh. I'm not going to get myself killed over this. Smacking you upside the face. That was the easiest $10 I ever made. So the man hit him, striking and wounding him. And the prophet departed and waited for the king along the road, disguising himself with a bandage over his eyes. And the king passed by, and he cried to the king and says, your servant went out into the thick of the battle, and then a soldier turned and brought a man to me and said, guard this man. If he is missing, your life shall be given for his life, or else you shall pay a talent of silver. While your servant was busy in there, he was gone, and the king of Israel said to him, what shall your judgment be? You yourself have decided it. Then he quickly took the bandage from his eyes, and King Israel recognized him as one of the prophets. Oh, these prophets don't like me. Then he said to him, thus says the Lord, because you have let a man go with whom I had devoted to destruction. In other words, I told you I was going to get that guy. He said I was the God of the mountains only and not the valleys. And you let him go. My plan was for him to be toast so you would know that I'm the Lord. I ain't trying to prove nothing to him. Therefore, your life shall be for his life and your people for his people. The king of Israel sent towards the home, restful and sullen, and came to Samaria. He's like, you pulled a King Saul, so I'm going to pull the King Saul on you. How do you like me now? That guy should have been dead. He came up against the people of God. And came up against the God of Israel. Step to me, and you didn't pull rank like I told you. Later, the following events took place. Naboth the Jezreelite had a vineyard in Jezreel besides the palace of the king Ahab in Samaria. So this is probably many years later. This is Ahab's downfall. Ahab is much like a King Saul. He's a punk. His wife is running him. He was like, oh yeah, I just want everyone to like me and I just want peace. And he was like, no. That guy talked crap about me, saith the Lord. He needs to go. So Ahab said to Naboth, give me your vineyard so that I may have it for a vegetable garden because it's near my house. And I will give you a better vineyard for it if it seems good, and I will give you the value of its money. Now, you weren't supposed to sell the land to your ancestors in Israel. See, he bought the hill of Samaria from a guy named Shemer. I don't think that guy was an Israelite, though. And he said, Naboth said to Ahab, the Lord forbid that I should give you my ancestral inheritance. That's in keeping with the law. And Ahab went home, resentful and sullen, because of what Naboth the Jezreelite said to him. For he said, I will not give you my ancestral inheritance. And he lay down his head and turned in his face, and he would not eat. His wife Jezebel came to him and says, why are you depressed and you won't eat? And he said, because I spoke to Naboth the Jezreelite and said to him, give me your vineyard for money, or else if you prefer, I'll give you another vineyard for it. But he answered, I will not give you my vineyard, because he's following the law, idiot. And Jezebel said to him, do you now govern Israel? She's like, I'm the daughter of a king. And you're not acting very king-like, brah. Get up, eat some food, and be cheerful. I will give you the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite. Let me show you how we do things in Sidonia when we want something. So she wrote letters in Ahab's name and sealed them with his seal and sent the letters to the elders and nobles who live with Naboth in his city. She wrote letters saying, proclaim a fast and seat Naboth at the head of the assembly. Seat 2 scoundrels opposite him and have them bring a charge against him, saying, you have cursed God and the king. Then take him out and put him to death. The men of his cities, the elders and the nobles who lived in the city, did as Jezebel had sent word to them, just as is written in the letters that she had sent to him. They proclaimed a fast and seated Naboth a feast at the head of the assembly. The 2 scoundrels came and sat opposite him, and the scoundrels brought a charge against him in the presence of the people, saying, Naboth cursed God and the king. So they took him out of the city and stoned him to death. False charge, 2 witnesses, false witnesses. There we go. Then they sent to Jezebel, saying, Naboth has been stoned. He's dead. And as soon as Jezebel heard that Naboth had been stoned and was dead, Jezebel said to Ahab, go take possession of the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to give you for money. For Naboth is not alive, but dead. I took care of your problem. As soon as Ahab heard that Naboth was dead, Ahab sent out to go down to the vineyard of Naboth of Jezreel to take possession of it. And the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite, saying, go down and meet King Ahab of Israel, who rules in Samaria, for he is now in the vineyard of Naboth, where he has gone to take possession. You shall say to him, thus saith the Lord, you have killed and also taken possession. Or have you killed and also taken possession? You shall say to him, Thus says the Lord, in the place where the dogs licked up the blood of Naboth, dogs will lick up your blood. Tit for tat, saith the Lord. Law of the land is eye for an eye, tooth for tooth. Let me show you how this works. Ahab said to Elijah, have you found me, O my enemy? He answered, I have found you because you have sold yourself to do what is evil in the sight of the Lord. I will bring disaster on you, and I will consume you. I will cut off from Ahab every male bond or free in Israel. So he has already gotten, based on this, that you're going to get it, and so are the people of Israel. Now he's saying, I'm going to kill every last descendant of yours, every last male of Ahab. And this is why even the grandchildren of Athaliah gots to go. Okay? Remember, when you see these people removed from Matthew's genealogy, it's not simply because we're just trying to change some numbers to make it add up. These people were removed from Israel based on this. Why? Because the judgment of God has to go to the third and fourth generation. So Athaliah is Jehoshaphat's wife, and then her son's got to die. So that's the second generation. And then his son's got to die. That's the third generation. And then his son's got to die. That's the fourth generation. Okay? And all those generations are not only going to die, they're not going to be accounted in the lineage. So, he says, and I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and like the house of Baasha, the son of Ahijah, because you have provoked me to anger and have caused Israel to sin. Also concerning Jezebel, the Lord says, the dog shall eat Jezebel within the bounds of Jezreel. That's where she's going to get it. Anyone belonging to Ahab who dies in the city, the dog shall eat, and any one of his who dies in the open country, the birds of the air shall eat. In other words, they're not going to get a proper burial. Indeed, there was no one like Ahab who sold himself to do what is evil in the sight of the Lord and urged on by his wife Jezebel. He is a simp. He acted most abominationly in going after idols as the Amorites had done, whom the Lord drove out before the Israelites. When Ahab heard these words, he tore his clothes and put sackcloth over his bare flesh and fasted and lay in the sackcloth and went about dejectedly. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah the Tishbite. Have you seen how Ahab has humbled himself before me? Because he has humbled himself before me, I will not bring the disaster in his days, but in his son's days I will bring the disaster on his house. For those of you who are like, God doesn't change his mind, God doesn't change. Yes, he does. This is the Lord. Okay? You need to understand that God the Father does not interact in time. The Lord, the word of the Lord, Yahweh, does. And so he says, you're going to get it, but then he humbles himself and he says, okay, well, you're still going to die because you're going to die, but I'm not going to wipe out your line until after you die. That's my mercy unto you because you humbled yourself. God is constantly saying, if I say I'm going to do something, you're going to get it, but then you humble yourself. Well, then I'm going to back off a little bit. You're still going to die. You're all going to die. You still need to be born again. But the point is, God repents of the evil that he says he was going to do. He relents. He backs off. He rolls it back a bit. Okay? This is his character. It is consistent. So we can say about God, he doesn't change. His character doesn't change. But he always, when people repent, backs off of even the pronouncements of judgment he made by a prophet. So don't let anyone tell you otherwise. This is the Lord's character, and that character does not change. But God does change his mind sometimes because he's watching and he's paying attention. And he's interacting in time. This is not hard at all. For 3 years, Aram and Israel continued without war. So Aram and Israel had peace for 3 years after he beat the crap out of them and sent them home in peace. But in the third year, King Jehoshaphat of Judah came down to Israel. And so now they have a marriage alliance. And the king of Israel said to his servants, do you know that Ramoth Gilead belongs to us, yet we are doing nothing to take it out of the hand of the king of Aram? He said to Jehoshaphat, will you go with me to Ramoth Gilead? In other words, we want that city. He said he was going to give back some cities, but Ramoth Gilead was ours. Let's go get it. He said to Jehoshaphat, will you go with me to battle at Ramoth Gilead? And Jehoshaphat replied to the king, I am as you are. My people are your people, and my horses are your horses. See how he married in with this stupid family, which he shouldn't have? But Jehoshaphat also said to the king of Israel, inquire first of the word of the Lord. See, Jehoshaphat is a good king. We're not really getting into Jehoshaphat, and we'll get into him a lot more in Chronicles. But at this point, he's married in with the house of Ahab. And it's really dumb of him. This is Asa's son. Then the king of Israel gathered the prophets together, about 400 of them, and he said to them, "Shall I go to battle at Ramoth-Gilead, or should I refrain?" And they said, "Go up, for the Lord will give it in the hand of the king." He gathered 400 of them. Remember this. Elijah kills the 450 prophets of Baal. He didn't kill the 450 prophets of Asherah. So you wonder who these 400 prophets that are gathered together. These are prophets of Asherah. These are not prophets of the Lord. These are prophets of Asherah. He still doesn't like the true prophets. But Jehoshaphat said, "Is there no other prophet here of the Lord whom I may inquire?" And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "There is still one other by whom we may inquire of the Lord, Micaiah the son of Imlah, but I hate him. For he never prophesies anything favorable about me, but only disaster." Jehoshaphat says, "Let not the king say such a thing." Then the king of Israel summoned the officer, said, "Bring Micaiah the son of Imlah." Now the king of Israel and the king of Jehoshaphat were sitting on their thrones, arrayed in their robes, in the threshing floor at the entrance to the gate of Samaria, and all the prophets were prophesying before them, saying very positive things. Very word of faithy kind of just blessings. It's the year of the Lord's favor and all that rot. And Zedekiah, the son of Kenaiah, made for himself horns of iron. Ooh, this is impressive. And he says, "Thus saith the Lord, with these you will gore the Arameans until they're destroyed." He came with props, y'all. Came with props. All the prophets were prophesying the same and saying, "Go up to Ramoth-Gilead and triumph, and the Lord will give it in the hand of the king." The messenger who had gone to summon Micaiah said to him, "Look, the words of the prophets with one accord are favorable to the king. Let your word be like the word of one of them and speak favorably." But Micaiah said, "As the Lord lives, whatever the Lord says to me, that I will speak." When he had come to the king said to him, "Micaiah shall go to Ramoth-Gilead to battle, or shall we refrain? What should we do? Give us your magic 8-ball. Yes, no?" And he said, "Go up and triumph. The Lord will give it in the hand of the king." He's like, "Why?" Because Micaiah's had it with him. He's actually keeping Micaiah in a dungeon. But the king said to him, "How many times must I make you swear to me to tell me nothing but the truth in the name of the Lord?" And then Micaiah said, "I saw Israel scattered on the mountains like sheep that have no shepherd." That's interesting that Jesus says, "I saw Israel like sheep that have no shepherd." And he's in this area when he's saying it. He's not in Samaria, but he's in the north. And the Lord said, "These have no master. Let each one go home in peace." The Lord said, "These have no master. Let each one go in peace." In other words, he's saying, I saw Israel scattered. What he's saying is, you're going to die here. Okay? I watched the Lord say to the people of Israel, "Go home, you have no master. Go home, you have no king." And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, "Did I not tell you that he would not prophesy anything favorable about me, but only disaster?" Well, yeah, because you're going to get it, dude. He's been telling you this through prophets for quite some time. Then Micaiah said, "Therefore hear the word of the Lord. I saw the Lord sitting on his throne with all the host of heaven standing beside him on the right and on the left." This is awesome. "And the Lord said, who will entice Israel so that he may go up and fall at Ramoth-Gilead?" Then one said one thing, another said another. In other words, the Lord's already decreed this guy's got to go. He's got to die. But who wants to be the instrument of his death? Well, how are you going to do it? Well, he likes to listen to false prophets. Maybe we'll do it that way. Until a spirit came forward and stood before the Lord, saying, "I will entice him." How, the Lord asked him. I'll give you a hint. This is not one of the good angels. Remember, Satan goes and stands before the Lord too. He said, "I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of all his prophets." And the Lord said, "You are to entice him, and you are to succeed. Go out and do this." Now, those of you who listen to the prophets of the NAR and the prophets of these wackadoodle nuts understand that the Lord will do this as a judgment for people who are refusing to listen to him. You want to hear soft, cushy things? I'll give you soft, cushy things even as America's about to fall. Oh, Franklin Graham, who runs Samaritan's Purse, Billy Graham's son. "I think the Lord saved Donald Trump's life and raised up Donald Trump to make America great again and turn it back to God." Why in God's name do you think that? Everything Trump has done has been pro-gay. His wife just wrote a book that he just bragged about, this bestseller, saying how sacred the right to an abortion is. The whole right is now pro-trans. They just don't want men competing in women's sports. They're saying keep the sport sacred, but we're fine with transsexuality. We're fine with homosexuality. We're fine with gay marriage. And really, we're fine with abortion too. There's a few states that are trying to hold the line on abortion, but all the states are saying we love abortion. Abortion is sacred to us, and so is Donald Trump's wife. And Donald Trump is fine with abortion in most cases. He's admitted it. He's not going to do a national abortion ban. The country right now, under Donald Trump and all these Republicans, is more liberal than it was under Barack Obama. By spades. It's so much more liberal. It's so much more progressive. It's so much more sinful. And people are like, we're going to cleanse America of all evil, just like they were saying when Trump won the first time. And I tried to warn them just like this, saying this is not better. It's worse. And you know what? They slandered me and said I'm full of the devil and all this stuff. And literally the Lord brought this word to me. Micaiah. Go read Micaiah. He's like, you're Micaiah. There's going to be 1,000 prophets saying bullcrap. And you're saying the one thing, and nobody's going to like you. This is just what it is. Why? Same thing as it was in the days of Jeremiah. This is what I was reading at the time. All the false prophets said, you're going to be fine. We're going to make Jerusalem great again. Jeremiah's like, no, actually, you're toast. America is toast. It's just what's going on. America's toast. So the Lord said, who will entice Ahab that he will go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? Oh, you don't want to tell me. Let me tell you something the Lord told me. It was about 13 years ago. When I was in jail in Duluth, Georgia, and been picked up not having committed any crime and abusefully treated, the Lord showed me a vision of 2 towers collapsing. This is about 10 years after 9/11. And he said there was enough blood of aborted babies to fill those 2 towers. And he said the one that they're building already has more blood of aborted babies, enough to fill that tower. That's what the Lord told me 13 years ago. Okay? America is doomed. We had our doom spelled out long before Obama came, long before Trump came, long before Biden came, and long before Trump just won. Okay? We had our doom sealed. God gave us more money, more power, won World War II, won World War I, won the Cold War, won everything. We got everything. And what did we give God in return? Here. A smorgasbord of abortions. We did that. And now that Roe v. Wade is overturned, just so you can show you the heart of America is so wicked, they're all saying we want to enshrine the right to abortion in our state constitutions. So now you know what the people really think. Oh, we'll vote Republican and conservative, but we'll also vote in abortion. This is America now. And the Christians are saying, it's so moral because the Republicans have won. Look, we're so moral. Now we can go back to our guns and money and vacations and not giving a crap and not sharing the gospel with anybody and being greedy and being selfish and lying and cheating on our taxes and doing evil and living in fornication and drunkenness and drugs and all the stuff that Christians are into now. And the Lord's going to be just fine with it because we're Americans and Republicans and MAGA and all that. Nope. Until a spirit came and stood before the Lord saying, I will entice him. How? He said, I will go out and be a lying spirit in the mouth of Franklin Graham and all the NAR prophets and Michael Flynn and all the Republicrats and all your pastors and all your teachers who are saying this is so great because Trump is in charge. And I'm going to be a lying spirit in their mouth. Why? So that when World War III comes, they're going to go out and saying, we're going to kick butt like we did in World War II. And no, you're not. You're going to fall like Germany fell in World War II. Thus saith the Lord. Boom. Mic drop statement, okay? Am I prophesying? Yes, I am prophesying. America is doomed. They're going to go down in World War III like Germany in World War II. They're doomed. Thus saith the Lord, all right? Then Zedekiah, son of Kenaiah, came up, and Micaiah slapped him on the cheek and said, why did the Spirit of the Lord pass from me to speak to you? I walked all this out, you guys. I walked all this out, okay? Micaiah replied, he said, you find out a day when you are going to hide in the inner chamber. You will find out on that day when you go to hide in an inner chamber. In other words, the guy who slapped him, he's like, you'll see. You'll see. And then the king of Israel ordered and said, take Micaiah and return him to Ammon, the governor of the city of Joash, the king's son, and say thus to the king, put this fellow in prison and feed him on reduced rations of bread and water until I come in peace. In other words, he says, feed him with the bread of affliction. In other words, give him the old stale bread, just barely enough to survive until I come back. And Micaiah said, if you return in peace, the Lord has not spoken by me. And he says, hear, O prophets, all of you. Okay? So if America doesn't fall in World War III and never rise again as a unified country, I'm a false prophet. Mark it down, make a short out of it. If America doesn't fall in World War III and never rise again as a unified country, I'm a false prophet. And soon, not like 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years now, within 5 years, maybe 6, okay? Micaiah said, if you return in peace, the Lord has not spoken by me. Hear you peoples, all of you. So the king of Israel and the king Jehoshaphat and Judah went up to Ramoth Gilead, and the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, I will just disguise myself and go into battle, but you wear your robes. And so the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. In other words, what is he doing? He's telling Jehoshaphat, this is actually what he says in KJV. He disguised himself so he doesn't look like a king. He says, Jehoshaphat, he said, you put on your robes. So what is it looking like? It looks like King Jehoshaphat is the king that's leading this thing. It's like, you dress in royal regalia, and I'm just going to dress low-key. Why? Because I'm a coward, and I want them all shooting at you instead of me. And his dumb, younger son-in-law is like, okay, Dad. Idiot. I will disguise myself and go to battle, but you wear the robes. So the king of Israel disguised himself and went into battle. Now the king of Aram had commanded 32 captains in his chariots. Fight with no one small or great, but only the king of Israel. When the captains of the chariots saw Jehoshaphat, they said, this is surely the king of Israel. So they turned to fight against him, and Jehoshaphat cried out. He's like, this was a stupid idea. Why am I dressed like a king and you're dressed like nobody? Because I wanted to shoot at you instead of me. This is dumb. So the captains of the chariot saw that it was not the king of Israel. They turned back and from pursuing him. Remember, these captains of these chariots are driving around these chariots with bows and arrows and spears and stuff like that, and they're all chucking them at just one guy. Okay? Imagine this. You got battle lines, but these chariots are just running at him, and they're under orders. Don't throw your spears and arrows and stuff like that at any of the guys in the line. Just that one guy who looks like a king. So here's him, and mobs of chariots are rolling in front of his lines, and they're just all throwing spears at him. And he's like, He's like, screw this. He's like Trump, like ducking behind that podium, right? And so he's like, I'm out. And he's like, but a certain man drew his bow unknowingly. Now, I don't know what this exact word is, but in the King James it says at random, okay? He says at a venture. So he says, he drew his bow Tom. It says completeness, usually innocence, full integrity, simplicity, at venture. In other words, he wasn't trying to hit Ahab. Remember, they're under orders to only try to hit Jehoshaphat, okay? He wasn't trying to hit him. This was an accident. He's just like, I'll just do my best. Oops, my bad. And it says, what does he say? He smote the crap out of him. I'm going to say that next time somebody tries to pick a fight me. I'm like, you do it and I will smite the crap out of you. He says he drew his bow unknowingly and struck the king of Israel between the scale armor and the breastplate. Okay, so scale armor is like mail. But the difference is it's not really mail is made of like a bunch of little tight wires and stuff like that. Scale armor is basically think about Samwise Gamgee's or Frodo's mithril armor. Okay, it's like a shirt and it's all scaly and it's got scales descending down somehow, hanging on hooks or whatever, and it's pretty good, but it's covering your main body, and then you have your breastplate over that, okay, which is even stronger. So it's the sleeves. So it's somehow between the scale armor and the breastplate. How did you do that? It was right here, I don't know, but he hits him right in the right spot. And he says to the driver of his chariot, "Turn around and carry me out of the battle, for I am wounded." And the battle grew hot that day, and the king was propped up on his chariot, facing the Arameans until at evening he died. Now, where did he go when he got out of the battle? Right to his precious vineyard that he wanted so bad. The blood from that wound flowed into the bottom of the chariot. Then about sunset, the shout went out through the army, every man to his city and every man to his country. Boy, that sounds like just like what Micaiah said. So the king died and was brought to Samaria, and they buried the king in Samaria. And they washed the chariot by the pool of Samaria, and the dogs licked up his blood, and the prostitutes washed themselves, and according to the word of the Lord that he had spoken. Now the rest of the acts of Ahab and all that he did in the ivory house and that he built, and all the cities that he built, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? So he built apparently an ivory house. That's expensive. And he slept with his ancestors, and his son Ahaziah succeeded him. Now remember the curse. You're going to get it. We need to take out 4 generations from Ahab. And it just so happens that half those generations are going to be in the house of David. Okay? So Jehoshaphat, the son of Asa, began to reign over Judah in the 4th year of King Ahab of Israel. And Jehoshaphat was 35 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 25 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Azubah, the daughter of Shilai. Okay? So he is going to be 35 years old. He's going to marry Ahab's daughter. And he walked in the way of his father Asa. He did not turn aside from doing what was right in the sight of the Lord. Yet the high places were not taken away, and the people still sacrificed there and offered incense in the high places. This is against the law. They're not necessarily offering to other gods, although some might be. But the point is they're supposed to offer to God in at the temple. They're not supposed to make offerings on the high places. Jehoshaphat also made peace with the king of Israel. Now, I think in his father's day, I think they had war, but I think they kicked their butts. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoshaphat and his power that he showed when he waged war, are they not written in the books of the annals of the kings of Judah? Okay, so we don't see a lot about Jehoshaphat. We're going to mostly see it in Chronicles, and we're going to do all that after the captivity. Okay. Now the rest of the acts. Okay, so the remnant of the male prostitutes who were still in the land in the days of his father Asa, he exterminated. So he says the male prostitutes. This is going to say the sodomites. The word is Kadesh. Kadesh comes from the word quasi, which means sacred person, devotee to licentious idolatry, sodomite, unclean. So Kadesh comes from quasi, sacred person. Okay, so these people are probably gay prostitutes. They're probably just not random people who happen to be gay. These are probably devotees to some, Baal or something like that are gay. They're male prostitutes. Okay. He says there was no king in Edom. A deputy was a king. So remember they had some guy who rose up in Edom in Solomon's day. So for some reason he didn't return. He has like a, what is his name? A steward or something like that. So Jehoshaphat made ships. So I think they're making the point that because there's no one to threaten them in Edom. So Jehoshaphat made ships of the Tarshish type to go to Ophir for gold, but they did not go, for the ships were wrecked at Ezion Geber. So in other words, they thought they were going to get away with this, but no, the ships were wrecked. Then Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, said to Jehoshaphat, "Let my servants go with your servants in the ships." But Jehoshaphat was not willing. So Jehoshaphat was trying to bring back the glory of Solomon, but remember, he doesn't have these West Coast ports now because the Philistines have those, and basically northern Israel has them. He doesn't have them. So he's trying to go basically to the port of Elat and go get gold from Ophir, which is probably like Oman or Yemen or India, probably. And then Jehoshaphat, he's asking Ahaz, "Well, let my guys go with your ships and, get some merchant trade like you guys get." And he's like, no. It's his own father-in-law, but he's like, no, I'm not trying to enrich Judah. Screw that. Then Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, said to Jehoshaphat, okay, so then Jehoshaphat slept with his ancestors and was buried with his ancestors in the city of David, and his son Jehoram succeeded him. So you see how much, just by being divided, how much weaker both Israel and Judah are. They both have half as much seaport access, half as much army. Judah's getting their butt kicked by Egypt here and there, and Israel's getting their butt kicked by Syria here and there. When they were united, they were unstoppable. Ahaziah, the son of Ahab, began to reign over Israel and Samaria in the 17th year of King Jehoshaphat of Judah. He reigned 2 years over Israel. So this is Ahab's son. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and he walked in the way of his father and his mother, and in the way of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, and called Israel to sin. He served Baal and worshipped him, and he provoked the Lord God of Israel to anger, just as his father has done. Remember, God said he wouldn't bring the doom until the days of his son. That is the end of 1 Kings. But this was probably all one book to begin with. So he says, after the death of Ahab, Moab rebelled against Israel. So remember, they're going to be right over here just south of Gilead. But they've got to go. Ahaziah had fallen through the lattice in his upper chamber in Samaria and lay injured, so he sent messengers saying, go inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, whether I shall recover from this injury. The god of Ekron. This is a Philistine god. Beelzebub. Beelzebub. Who's that? That's another name for Satan. It's Lord of the Flies. Okay? So, not doing too good here. He gets killed and immediately goes, go ask the Philistine god. Why don't you ask our God? I thought we've got all kinds of gods here. Why don't we ask them? No, ask the Philistine god. But the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, go up and meet the messengers of the king of Samaria and say to them, is it because there is no God in Israel that you are going to inquire to Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? That's what I just said. And therefore, thus saith the Lord, you shall not leave the bed where you have gone, but you shall surely die. So Elijah went. And the messengers returned to the king, and he said to them, why have you returned? And they answered him, there came a man to meet us, and he said, go back to the king who had sent him, and said, thus saith the Lord, is it because there is no God in Israel that you are sending to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore you shall not leave the bed in which you have gone, you will surely die. And he said to them, what sort of man that came to you to meet you that told you these things? And he said, a hairy man with a leather belt around his waist, like John the Baptist. He said, it's Elijah the Tishbite. It's Elijah the Tishbite. It's him. And then the king sent to him captain of 50 with 50 men. He went up to Elijah, who was sitting on top of the hill, and he said to him, O man of God. The king says, come down. But Elijah answered over the captain of the 50, if I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50. Then fire came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. This is why the false prophet, remember, Elijah has resurrected somebody from the dead, that boy. Elijah has brought the rain back, and Elijah can call down fire from heaven. Well, in the days of the two witnesses, there's going to be no rain, so it's going to come back after they're dead. And the false prophet's going to be calling down fire from heaven, and he is going to bring the Antichrist back to life somehow. And the king sent another captain of 50, and he said, come to him. He said, O man of God, this is the king's order. Come down quickly. But Elijah answered him, if I am a man of God, let fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50. Then fire came down from heaven and consumed him and his 50. And then the king sent a captain of 50, a third captain with 50. And the third captain of 50 went up and came down, fell on his knees before Elijah, and entreated him, O man of God, please let my life and the life of these 50 servants of yours be precious in your sight. Look, fire came down from heaven and consumed the two former captains of 50 men with their 50s. Now let my life be precious in your sight. So when they say fire came down from heaven, they're not talking about missiles. They're not talking about flames. They're talking about lightning, okay? Lightning was considered fire from heaven for these people. So lightning is going to come down and fry these people. Bzoosh, bzoosh. Okay, can you see how Yahweh is more of a Zeus than Zeus is? Okay, Zeus is a ripoff of Yahweh. He's constantly showing up like this. And that's why the Antichrist and the false prophet are going to call down fire from heaven. But they're going to use probably drones or missiles or something weird like that to mimic this. Then the angel of the Lord said to Elijah, go down with him and do not be afraid of him. So he went down. He set out and went down with him to the king. And he said to him, thus says the Lord, because you have sent messengers to inquire of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, is it because there is no God in Israel to inquire of this word, therefore you shall not leave the bed which you have gone, but you shall surely die. So he died according to the word of the Lord that Elijah has spoken. It's not Elijah's fault, it's what you did. His brother Jehoram succeeded him, and as king in the second year of King Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat of Judah, because Ahaziah had no son. So it says his brother Jehoram succeeded him as king in the second year of King Jehoram, the son of Jehoshaphat of Judah, because Ahaziah had no son. So this is now Ahab's next son, but he has a cousin, and they're both named Jehoram. So when you get to Chronicles, it's going to call one Joram and one Jehoram, but they have the same name. Okay, so they're cousins, and they have the same name. But this is now, Ahaziah has no son, so this is still a son of Ahab here. Now the rest of the acts of Ahaziah that he did, are they not written in the book of the Annals of the Kings of Israel, the book of the Chronicles? Now when the Lord was about to take Elijah up to heaven by a whirlwind, Elijah and Elisha were on their way from Gilgal, and Elijah said to Elisha, "Stand here, for the Lord has sent me as far as Bethel." But Elisha said, "As the Lord lives and as you yourself lives, I will not leave you." So they went down to Bethel. Okay? Now this is important. Look where they are. They're in Bethel. You want to compare this, you Bible nerds, you want to compare this to Joshua's campaign into Israel. Okay? So he goes into Bethel. Now he says, the company of prophets that were in Bethel came out to Elijah and said, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master away from you?" And he said, "Yes, I know. Keep silent." See how all the prophets know by the same Holy Spirit speaking through all of them that Elijah's going to go get raptured today? Elijah has a 3.5-year ministry. Now, it doesn't say in the context of everything else that happens, but it's probably around this time. Because this is not being exactly chronological here. It's going back and forth. It's telling you why God's taking out Ahab. So it's going back into his life and then forward into his life, okay? It's not like he was good and then he does a bad thing all of a sudden. Elijah basically prophesies for a 3-year period. Then he gets a successor, and now we're back to Elijah and Elisha again, okay? Then he calls down the fire, and that's kind of it for him. So Elijah said to him, "Elisha, stay here, for the Lord has sent me to Jericho." So he's going from Gilgal to Bethel to Jericho. I thought they were in Ai. Hold on. Gilgal, Bethel, and Jericho. Okay. So he's retracing Joshua's steps out of the land. Then the company of prophets, So they came to Jericho, and the company of prophets that were at Jericho drew near to Elijah and said to him, "Do you know that today the Lord will take your master from you?" And he answered, "Yes, I know. Be silent. Be quiet." Then Elijah said to him, "Stay here, for the Lord has sent me to the Jordan." But he went, "As the Lord live, as you yourself live, I will not leave you." So the two of them went on. And 50 men of the company of the prophets that stood some distance from them, as they were both standing before the Jordan. So 50 men of the company of the prophets also went and stood some distance from them, as they were both standing in the Jordan. So 50 prophets witnessed this. Then Elijah took his mantle, rolled it up, and struck the water, and the water was parted to one side as onto the other, until the two of them crossed dry ground. So just like it's happened when Joshua went in. And when they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what to do before I am taken from you." And Elisha said, "Please let me inherit a double share of your spirit." Okay? Now this is kind of like the transfer from Christ to the apostles. And so he responded, "You have asked a hard thing, yet if you see me as I am being taken from you, it will be granted. If not, it will not." So in other words, if you witness me being taken up, remember who received the power of the Holy Spirit from on high? Those who witnessed Jesus being taken up, right? And they continued walking and talking, in a chariot of fire and horses and fire separated the two of them, and Elijah ascended into a whirlwind from heaven. So essentially, he goes back out of Israel to somewhere around there. That's where Moses is buried, okay? And he basically retraces Joshua's steps into Israel, so he kind of goes back to reconnect them historically to Moses. And then he gets raptured. And then we learn later that Moses gets resurrected. And then we see these two on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus. Why? Because they are the two witnesses. He's like, I need Moses for something later, and I need Elijah for something later, so I'm taking them. So Elisha kept watching and crying out, "Father, Father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen." But when he could no longer see him, he grasped his own clothes and tore them in 2 pieces. And he picked up the mantle of Elisha that had fallen on him and went back and stood on the bank of Jordan. He took the mantle of Elijah, which had fallen from him, and struck the water, saying, "Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?" And when he struck the water was parted from one side to the other, and Elisha went over. So now he's going like Joshua. When the company of the prophets that were at Jericho saw him at a distance, they declared, "The spirit of Elijah rests on Elisha." They came and met him and bowed on the ground before him, and they said to him, "See now, we have 50 strong men among your servants. Please let them go and seek your master." It may be that the Spirit of the Lord has caught him up and thrown him down on some mountain or into some valley. He responded, no, do not send them. So these other prophets are like, maybe, because probably he's being caught up in a whirlwind, right? He's like, no, it's fiery chariots. He went to heaven. He's thinking maybe a tornado picked him up and threw him and he's dead. So it probably looks to them like a tornado picked him up. He's like, no, he didn't. He's good. Okay, so you see he's the God of a tornado, God of fire from heaven, God of rain, clouds, and storms, right? All this stuff. And then he says, but when he urged them until he was ashamed, he said, send them. They sent 50 men to search for him for 3 days, but they couldn't find him. When he came back to him, he remained at Jericho, and he said, did I not say, do not go? I told you, you're not going to find him. He went to heaven. But the people of the city said to Elisha, the location of this city is good, as my Lord sees, but the water is bad and the land is unfruitful. So this is right after he's back. And he says, bring me a new bowl and put salt in it. So they brought it to him. And when he went to the spring of water and threw the salt into it, King James, I thought, says meal. No, it's salt. Okay. Thus, let's see. When he brought the spring of water and threw the salt into it, they said, thus says the Lord, I have made the water wholesome. From now on, neither death nor miscarriage shall come from it. So apparently the water was tainted and people were dying or miscarrying because of drinking it. Well, it is the water from Jericho, and Jericho's cursed, so maybe this city is not good. In other words, the location of the city is good. Well, what does he do? He just made cursed Jericho uncursed. That's interesting. So the water has been wholesome to this day, according to the word that Elisha spoke. And he went up from there to Bethel, and when he was going up on the way, some small boys, he's going right back and retracing Elijah's steps. Some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, go away, bald head, go away, bald head. And when he turned around and saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. And then 2 she-bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. Now, who are these boys? Some people will say these are little kids. Some people say these are teenagers, like a gang. I don't think 42 little kids are going to be running around without their parents. So my guess would be these are more like a teenage gang, basically, a bunch of stupid kids. And from there he went to Mount Carmel and then returned to Samaria. So he's going right back up into Samaria to talk some more crap to Ahab. Oh no, Ahab's dead. I'm sorry. In the 18th year of King Jehoshaphat of Judah, Jehoram, the son of Ahab, became king over Israel and reigned 12 years. So now, see, we're going back to when Jehoshaphat is still alive. Okay. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, not like his father or mother, for he removed the pillar of Baal that his father had made. Well, that's a little bit better. Nevertheless, he clung to the sin of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he caused Israel to commit. He did not depart from it. Too late, because the Lord already said, I'm executing this judgment on Ahab and his generation after he dies. Now King Mesha of Moab was a sheep breeder, and he used to deliver to the king of Israel 100,000 lambs and the wool of 100,000 rams. And when Ahab died, the king of Moab rebelled against the king of Israel. So Moab is now like, we are not going to pay you tribute anymore. So King Jehoram marched out of Samaria at that time and mustered all Israel. And he went and sent the word to King Jehoshaphat of Judah, and the king of Moab has rebelled against me. Will you go with me to battle against Moab? And he said, I will. I'm with you, and my people are as your people, and my horses as your horses. Now, this would be his brother-in-law now, okay? And when he asked, he said, by what shall we march? And Jehoram said, by the way of the wilderness of Edom. So the king of Israel and the king of Judah and the king of Edom sent out, because apparently the king Edom is still under the dominion of Israel, it looks like. So I don't know how, because it seems like God raised up to him another Edomite king in the days of Solomon. So I don't know when they put down Edom. But apparently they had a deputy reigning there because they took out the king of Edom, and now Edom's under Judah. Or they're an ally, one of the two. And he said, when they had made a roundabout march of 7 days, there was no water for the army of the animals that were with them. And the king of Israel said, alas, the Lord has summoned us 3 kings only to be handed over to Moab. So now they're saying there's a king. In the last chapter, they said there's no king. Now he's saying the king of Edom. But Jehoshaphat said, is there no prophet of the Lord here, though through whom we may inquire of the Lord? Then one of the kings of the servants of Israel answered, Elisha, the son of Shaphat, who used to pour water in the hands of Elijah, is here. He's like, ooh, that's like Micaiah. Jehoshaphat said, the word of the Lord is with him. So the king of Israel and Jehoshaphat and the king of Edom went down to him. And Elisha said to the king of Israel, what have I to do with you? Go to your father's prophets or to your mother or to your mothers. What is he saying? He's saying, go to the prophets of Asherah. Ask them. But the king of Israel said to him, no, it is the Lord who summoned us three kings No, it is the Lord who has summoned us three kings only to be handed over to Moab. So in other words, we don't trust Yahweh. We think Yahweh is going to hand us over to Moab. Elisha said, as the Lord of hosts lives, whom I serve, were it not that I have regard for King Jehoshaphat of Judah, I would give you neither a look nor a glance. But get me a musician. And then while the musician was playing, the power of the Lord came upon him. And he said, thus saith the Lord, I will make this wadi full of pools. And thus saith the Lord, you shall neither see neither wind nor rain, but the wadi will be filled with water, so that you shall drink, and your cattle and your animals. This is only a trifle in the sight of the Lord, for he is also the hand of Moab over you. You shall conquer every fortified city and every choice city, and every good tree shall fell. All springs of water shall stop up, and every good piece of land you shall ruin with stones. The next day, about the time of morning offering, suddenly water began to flow from the direction of Edom until the country was filled with water. When all the Moabites heard that the kings had come to fight against them, all who were able to put on army, from the youngest to the oldest, were called up and drawn at the frontier. When they rose early in the morning, the sun shone upon the water, and the Moabites saw the water opposite of them as red blood. That's interesting. And they said, this is blood. The kings must have fought together and killed one another. Now then, Moab to the spoils. So they have reddish clay, apparently, and they're seeing pools of water and think that there's pools of blood all over because all these kings killed them. And then they just took the bodies away or something. But when they came to the camp of Israel, the Israelites rose and attacked the Moabites and fled before them, and they entered Moab and continued the attack. The cities they overturned, and every good piece of land, and everyone threw a stone until it was covered, and every spring of water they stopped up, and every good tree they felled. Only at Kir Haresh did the stone walls remain until the slingers surrounded it and attacked it. When the king of Moab saw that the battle was going against him, he took with him 700 swordsmen and broke through opposite the king of Edom, but they could not. Then he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him, and offered him as a burnt offering on the wall. And great wrath came upon Israel, so they withdrew from him and returned to their own land. So apparently, this guy offers up his son as a burnt offering to his god or whatever. And it says, and great wrath came upon Israel, so they withdrew from him. And for whatever reason, his god, this angel, this demon, whoever this is, responds and basically shows up. And Israel is scared of the wrath of this, and they leave. It doesn't say they pitied him because of what he did. It says a great wrath came upon this people. Again, it says there was a great indignation against Israel, and they departed from him. So why? I don't know. It's like another god or a demon was actually appeased by him offering up his son as a burnt sacrifice, and actually showed up and made a stink in some way, and Israel was like, let's get out of here. That's crazy. Now there was a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, thy servant my husband is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord. And the creditor is come to take unto him my two sons to be bondmen. And Elisha said to her, what shall I do for thee? Tell me, what hast thou in thy house? And she said, the handmaid said, I have nothing in my house but a pot of oil. Then he said, go borrow the vessels abroad from all thy neighbors, even empty vessels, borrow not a few, get as many as you can. And when thou art come in, stop saying thou, then go in and shut the door behind you and your children, start pouring into these vessels, and when each is full, set it aside. He's like, Jesus did this loaves and fishes thing twice. Well, we're not just going to give one person oil and bread, we're going to give another person oil too. And so she left him and shut the door behind her and her children. They kept bringing the vessels to her, and she kept pouring. And the vessels were full, and he said to her, bring me another vessel. But he said to her, there are no more. Then the oil stopped flowing. This is kind of an interesting thing. It's almost like the Holy Spirit stops flowing after there's no more people to get saved, and we're the vessels. And then she came and told the man and said, go sell the oil and pay your debts, and you and your children can live on the rest. One day Elisha was passing through Shunem, and there was where a wealthy woman lived who urged him to have a meal. And whenever he passed by that way, he would stop there for a meal. So she said to her husband, look, I'm sure that this man who regularly passes our way is a holy man of God. Let us make a small roof chamber with walls and put it there for him a bed and a table and a chair and a lamp so that he can stay here whenever he goes. She's like, let us set up an Airbnb guest room for this dude because he's a prophet and we like him. One day when he came there, he went up to the chamber and lay down there and said to his servant Gehazi, call the Shunammite woman. And when he had called her, she stood before him. And he said, say to her, since you have taken all this trouble for us, what may be done for you? Would you have a word spoken in your behalf to the king or the commander of the army? And she said, I live among my own people. And he said, what may be done for her? And Gehazi answered, well, she has no son, and her husband is old. And he said, call her. When he called her, she stood at the door. And he said, at this season and in due time you shall embrace your son. And she replied, no, my lord, O man of God, do not disturb your servant. The woman conceived and bore a son at that season in due time, and Elijah declared to her. When the child was older, he went out one day to his father among the reapers, and he complained to his father, oh, my head, my head. And the servant said to him, carry him to his mother. And he carried and brought him to his mother, and the child sat in her lap until noon, and he died. So he got like some kind of aneurysm or something, and he died. And she went up and laid him on the bed of the man of God, closed the door on him, and left. And she called to her husband and said, send me one of the servants of one of the donkeys, so that I may go to the man of God and come back again. And he said, why go to him today? It is neither a new moon nor a Sabbath. And she said, it will be all right. Then she saddled the donkey and said to her, urge the animal on, do not go back unless I tell you. Do not hold back unless I tell you. So she set out and came to the man of God at Mount Carmel. Remember, he's up here in Mount Carmel chilling, apparently. And when the man of God saw her coming, he said to Gehazi, his servant, look, there's a Shunammite woman. Run at once to meet her and say, are you all right? Is your husband all right? Is the child all right? And she answered, it is all right. When she came to the man of God on the mountain, she caught hold of his feet, and Gehazi approached to push her away. But the man of God said, let her alone, for she is in bitter distress. The Lord has hidden it from me and has not told me. So the Lord has kept him from knowing what the problem is. Then she said, did I ask my Lord for a son? Did I not say, do not mislead me? Then he said to Gehazi, gird up your loins and take up my staff in my hand and go. If you meet anyone, give no greeting. And if anyone greets you, do not answer, and lay my staff on the face of the child. Then the mother of the Lord said, as the child lives, as you and you yourself live, I will not leave without you. So he rose up and followed her. Gehazi went on ahead and laid the staff on the face of the child, but there was no sound or signal of life. Came back to meet him and said, the child is not awakened. When Elijah came to the house, he saw the child lying dead in the bed. So he went in and closed the door on the two of them and prayed to the Lord. And then he got up on the bed, lay on the child, putting his mouth in the child's mouth, his eyes on his eyes, his hands on his hands. And while he lay bent over him, the flesh of the child became warm. So he does the same thing Elisha does to raise this child from life. And you have Jesus bringing a child back from life who's in a coffin. You have Paul bringing a child back to life who's dead. Or, falls down dead. So it's like a Jesus and the apostles thing. He got down, walked once to and fro, got up again, bent over him. The child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. So the child sneezed 7 times and then opened his eyes. Elijah summoned Gehazi and said, call the woman Shunammite, and he called her. Then he called him and said, take your son. When she came and fell at his feet, bowing to the ground, then she took her son and left. Then Elisha returned to Gilgal, and there was a famine in the land. As the company of prophets was sitting before him, he said to his servant, put the large pot on and make some stew for the company of prophets. One of them went out to the field to gather herbs, and he found a wild vine, gathered it from a lapful of wild gourds, and came and cut them up into the pot of stew, not knowing what they were. Then they served it to some of the men to eat, but while they were eating the stew, they cried out, O man of God, there is death in the pot, and they could not eat it. So they thought these gourds were poisonous, apparently. And he said, bring some flour, and he threw it in the pot, and he said, serve the people and let them eat, and there was nothing harmful in the pot. You will drink every deadly thing, and it will not harm you. A man came from Baal Shalisha, bringing food and the first fruits of the man of God, 20 loaves of barley and fresh ears of grain in a sack. And Elisha said, give it to the people and let them eat. But his servant said, how can this be set before 100 people? So he repeated, give it to the people and let them eat. For thus saith the Lord, they shall eat and have some left. Boy, it's like the second feeding of loaves and fishes. And he set it before them, and they ate, and they had some left according to the word of the Lord. It's like there's 2 feedings of loaves and fishes going on here. That's interesting. Then Naaman, I think I'm going to call it quits there. So we're transitioning from Elijah to Elisha because there's so much going on. It's like half of the book of 2 Kings is all about this So I think I'm going to wrap that up with the end of the ministry of Elijah, because the ministry of Elisha is going to start in chapter 3, and it's going to go, in chapter 9, we're still talking about that. And then the stuff with Athaliah we'll probably cover in the next one. So, because we just covered like 10 chapters. So we're going to call that a wrap with the ministry of Elijah. And then in the next one, we're going to get into, we'll probably start here on chapter 3 with Jehoshaphat. And the ministry of Elisha starting. Because that's where Elisha really starts to take charge over things. And that's going to go on, and then we'll include in that next one the stuff that goes on with Athaliah and the sons that come after that. But as you can see here, there's 25 chapters, and that by the next one, we're going to be probably into like chapter 15, 16. And then around that time, that's when we're going to start adding the prophets in. So there's a lot of prophets to cover between that, and it's going to go pretty slow. So we'll probably get into that when I get back into from India, and in the next one I'll just cover the ministry of Elisha, and then probably the drama with Athaliah and those couple of sons until Ahab's line is all dead. And then we'll call it a wrap. So after that, by the time we get into the prophets, I'm going to be teaching on the New Testament while I'm teaching on the prophets, so you guys should get a lot of juicy connections between the Old Testament and the New Testament. So hope you guys are blessed by this. Again, I'm going to be here for... I'm actually flying out a week from today, so I'll probably do 1 or 2 more videos before I go, probably just 1. So it'll probably just be that last one on Elisha. And then I'm reading a ton of stuff on mythologies, and I'm trying to connect the dots between all the pagan religions and where they coincide with the biblical history for my next book, Serpent by the Way. When I get back, I'll probably launch into kind of a summary of where I'm at with that. And I don't know, we'll see if we're in World War III by the time I get back. We may be in World War III by the beginning of the year. We'll see if Trump actually takes office. Had some weird dreams about stuff like that, but we'll see. And then we'll see what God does with our wicked nation over the next 5 years. So I hope you guys are blessed by this. Hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Batman out. Peace.
Peace, I'm out. I'm Batman.